I got to make a casual observation. I joined the Radio Club of America. I was working in Land Mobile Radio, Communications Magazine, as a matter of fact, if you remember that far back. And I'm primarily a broadcaster, but I also spent one lifetime in SATCOM, video uplink for TCI, and I've worked for Qualcomm on putting video on phones in the carriers. And the only two organizations that are common across all of that is, of course, IEEE and RCA. That's rather unique, and I had not thought of that until this very minute. Anyway. Let's talk about next generation interactive television, which you may know as ATSC3. So, okay, there we go. In a nutshell, what's going on here is there's a transition to this next generation of television transmission. And the reason is that the old system was not very extensible. It was kind of stuck with a modulation scheme and stuck with a particular set of codecs and not very upgradable. And there was a quick move to try and move to ATSC2 and make it backward compatible, but it was realized pretty quickly that they just really had to throw the baby in the bathwater out and start all over again. So what's nice about this is that it is in fact extensible. You can change every part of it. Its primary characteristics are is that it has better transmission. You can use single frequency networks thanks to the OFDM nature of the modulation. Its coverage is better and its payload. It gets a little closer to the curve. And you can do mobile with it, which is something you can't do with current ATSC1 television at all. Shannon's curve, God, remember that. A little closer. Better content. It's IP based, so we can do interactive things. We can do digital ad insertion. We can do radio stations. We can do anything you want that you can make into IP, which is everything. And of course, it is well integrated with both the internet and 5G, something that just wasn't around when 1.0 came out here. And better quality, arguably, because you can use better codecs and make 4K pictures and immersive sound and all of that kind of stuff like that. So the current status is there's two groups who work on this. One is called BitPath, which is closely related to my employer, which is Sinclair Broadcasters. They own 192 TV stations, so they kind of get around. There's another organization, Pearl, which promotes ATSC 3.0 out there, and our current count is that they're looking at 20 markets in this year by the year's end. Now, 8 of them are already launched. 8 more of them are supposed to be by December, and actually I do have to increment. I got a note this morning, we're up to 9 that were launched. And if you want to see the path of progress, just go to bitpath.com. This is the list of who's on the air now, and I think Raleigh just joined. That would be the next one to complete there. So you want to learn more about 3.0. I'm normally when I do this for SBE chapters and things like that, I list all the SMPTE material, the IEEE material, and the SBE material out there. But if you wanted just to figure out what this is pretty quick, Pearl has a host station manual. It is free. Just go to the Pearl site and download it. And it pretty much tells you everything about what happens inside conversion to 3.0. What it doesn't talk about a lot is the broadcast app and the interactive nature of things, and that's what we're going to talk about here. So there's a couple of acronyms that are important here. ATSC is the Advanced Television System Committee. They are the people who maintains the standards here. 3.0 standard is about 4 feet high. If you print it out, ATSC 1 was maybe an inch. Next Generation TV is CTA's marketing name for ATSC. So when you see that on a television set that's for sale, that means that it is compliant. NextGen broadcasting is what it really is, because you can do radio, you can do stills, you can do anything you want with it. It's not just TV. AEA&I is, and that one really trips off the tongue. AEA&I is a working name for one implementation of advanced emergency alerting and informing. And that's kind of my pet project, so that's what we'll talk about here. When you see it in real life in a few years, it'll be branded by broadcasters. It'll be Channel 7 Emergency News Alert System, or whatever they wish to call it there. I am not a marketing guy, and I recognize that. AWARN is an organization that promotes advanced emergency alerting out there, and NVIS is a relatively new organization, all easily searchable here, that does Next Generation Video Information Systems Alliance. So they're kind of the representative of the vendors out there. A lot of stakeholders in this. So if I want to go play ATSC 3.0, everyone in this room is saying, where do I get stuff? Well, probably the lowest bar is to go buy the Silicon Dust Kickstarter HD Home Run Quattro 4K. It is a 1.0 and a 3.0 tuner built in, and I just got mine and I have not yet hooked it up. They also make televisions, and if you go to this site, digitaltrends.com, there's a list that is constantly update of every reasonable device that's out there to receive. And if you want test gear and stuff, just send me a note and I'll turn you on to that. Now, one of our projects at Sinclair, this is Mark Aiken, who was really instrumental in 3.0. He was one of the 10 people, and me too, in the back of the room. I went, this is crazy. This should have been OFDM from the get-go. And it's been a 20-year battle to get there. And in the meantime, the technologies have evolved so much. And what we're looking at here is the very first chip, 3.0 chip in a phone. It is the Mark I. One Media stands for Open Network Enabled Media. That's the organization inside of Sinclair that pushes this. And that is the very first phone absolutely operating with Jason, who's very instrumental in it, in the Chief Executive Officer's corner office at Sinclair, being zoomed to the world just days ago. Advanced emergency alerting and informing in a nutshell. It's personalized, it's targeted, it's frictionless, it goes wherever you are, it can work on any device, and extremely resilient and reliable. We're launching a test in Washington on WJLA. And I shouldn't say test, we're actually just going for a production version of this. And the reason it's there is it's very close to our home office in Hunt Valley. That was a lot more important before COVID, but it is the 6th DMA. It is our largest station. It is extremely news-centric, and of course, it's in the district. So the regulators and all the rest of the organizations of the world have easy access to it. And we have a lot of involvement in the market from RTDNA, the Radio Television Digital News Association, and Fox Networks, and all of that like that there. So what's in it for the viewers? Well, first of all, no unwanted or unneeded alerts. This is hugely important. So you don't get alerts that don't apply to your area. There are no tests in it. It never interrupts the programming, and you get to set the level you want. So what's in it also for the viewers? Well, it can wake you up in the middle of the night if your life and property are in fact in danger. You can take it with you. It's mobile. Any ATSC3 device can be part of the alerting structure. That can be TV, smartphones, building alarms, automobiles. We'll get more into that as we go through this. What's in it for the broadcasters? Number one, it does not interrupt programming. It has a squeeze and beep function. You've seen this before. Every promotion department, news department uses it to push the picture back, give you 3 beeps to tell you to pay attention, and they run a little crawl at the bottom. That's the first presentation of how this looks. So we do not have to interrupt the Super Bowl in order to give you life-saving information. It also expands the newsroom's reach because it carries it to mobile devices, and it is tools that work not only for the very bad day scenario, the end of the world, nuclear attack kind of things, but also for the very trivial. So if it's just school closings and only a handful of people need that information and want it, this system can target it down to that level very easily. Also, it maintains the broadcaster's social contract of all the members in RCA's large group here. Broadcasters are unique because they get the spectrum in exchange for serving the public interest, convenience, and necessity. And for those of you who are into the history, that goes all the way back to the Federal Radio Commission before anybody even dreamed of an FCC. And besides that, it's in our DNA. Emergencies is what we do. If there's an emergency, your television station drops advertising and goes wall to wall, and they cover the fire or the flood or whatever. We live for this as broadcasters. That is our highest purpose in the world. So what about emergency managers? Well, this is really cool. In every other system that involved broadcasting, EAS in particular, you handed your alert off to the broadcaster and they decided when and if and how to rebroadcast that. This one passes right through the station untouched. There is no human hands on it at all. When the trusted entity pushes the button, it goes all the way to the broadcast app on the other end, and you'll see how this works in a couple minutes here. What about first responders? Well, that's really cool because we can use the same system in a highly encrypted mode in order to do all of these capability for first responders and take advantage of the coverage that's inherent inside of ATSC 3.0, et cetera. And part of that is because this network is highly resilient, more resilient than cellular networks, and the penetration is higher. It's high power, high tower broadcasting, multiple transmitters. And part of this is that all the transmitters form a mesh network and they all carry the same basic alerting messages, et cetera. So it's almost hard to outrun it. It also allows them to use off-the-shelf equipment. You can buy a standard cell phone, you put the right software or middleware on it, and you have a special device here. You can also do that for televisions, for doing displays and for signage and things like that. And you can take advantage of the data capability to be able to send out important documents, escape maps, et cetera. By the way, that's my neighborhood. That's the escape routes from the fires in Colorado about 2 weeks ago. Also automotive. Well, we'd certainly like to see automobiles pick up ATSC 3.0, primarily for things like map updates. It's a pretty good way to do it. It is a broadcast function every car needs to know as the maps are updated, et cetera. But imagine leaving the house as the fire is approaching and your car already has the escape routes programmed into it, as does your cellular phone. That's pretty cool stuff. So what about MVPDs? Well, it can integrate into their platform, meaning cable and satellite, fairly easily too. It provides a much higher level of information, but we use standard protocols, so everything kind of works here. And what about the carriers? Well, the carriers, why would they want to put chips in phone? A couple of reasons. Wireless emergency alert, which is what you get on your cell phone, WEA, works pretty good, but this works a whole lot better. And it kind of solves a bunch of problems for them because there's a lot of pressure for them to do more with WEA. Everybody knows WEA kind of is amber and maybe tornado and flood alerts at this point, but there's a lot of pressure to carry more information and all, and we can kind of relieve that. Also, in an emergency, most of this is broadcast information. You want to reach as many people as you can. You don't want to have point-to-point communications going on here as people search. We'll talk about that a little bit too. So what about downstream? Well, it'll also work with things like chips and smoke detectors. You can open closed door. Why would you want to do that? Well, you'd want to open the door on a fire station when you first sensed an earthquake so that it doesn't get stuck. And you also want to stop elevators and shut down building systems for exactly the same reason. That's how fast this works here. It ends over alerting, and that is huge. Less alerting is better alerting. Only meaningful alerts get to you, and the tests are invisible to users. What a test looks like to you is that if it doesn't work, you get a little message that says you might want to check your antenna connection or configuration of your television set. Now, as much as we think that radio is all about science, there is also a science of how people react to emergencies. And the key term there is milling. It always returns to that. Human nature is that when you tell them there's an alert out there, they want to go and validate it before they do anything. Is that real? What do I do? So what we're doing here with AEA&I is we're reducing the milling time, because not only do they get the alert, but they also get the escape map and they get the validation. And we can do all sorts of things, including setting up individual flash channels that are event specific to be able to cover that. So what else is good with it? Well, it's granny proof. This is not hard to run. It'll work exactly like your telephone or cell phone does. It's W3C compliant, and it comes baked into the devices. You don't have to do anything special to get it. It also integrates the current information distribution system, which is basically IPAWS, which is what gives messages to broadcasters now from those trusted entities and expands its capability. So we get alerts at the speed of light from trusted authorities that are transmitted instantly and automatically, fast enough for useful for even approaching earthquakes. How cool is that? So fewer opportunities for human error also. There's nobody at the television station or the radio station that sits there and bets Vets this out. There's no manual daisy chains. It is easily aggregated, validated, and prepared for presentation. That broadcast mesh network is really kind of cool too. It's a mesh network composed of very high power transmitters, and they each talk to each other. So for this system to survive, when a cell tower goes down and wipes out communication in a particular area, for our system to survive, to be able to broadcast this information, I only need one functioning television station covering the area, one 3.0 station. And that has, in the history of events in North America, has never happened that all of the broadcast signals have gone away in any particular market. But listening to one of the presentations earlier, I was thinking, what about a Carrington event? There's no event code for a Carrington event inside our systems. I wonder if there should be, or would it be moot if all of a sudden all the electronic devices in the world would suddenly go away? Something to ponder. So let's talk about the BA and AEA&I. And what I want you to remember is the broadcast app is critical in here. There are two pieces to a television set. There's a receiver application. It comes built into the TV. That's the thing that allows it to be a basic TV. Everything after that is the broadcaster app, and that's unique. That is sent out by the broadcasters, so it can continually update it and change it and modify it. As I said, everything in this is extensible. If you don't like it, you can go and fix it. So you can I bet you everyone in this room has seen this chart of the history of emergency broadcast communications going all the way back to Conelrad. So we're going to add one more arrow to it here pretty soon. But I have to convince you that this is very, very different. None of the stuff on that last slide makes sense in this new world. And we produced an FAQ. Just drop me a note and I'll give you an FAQ under NVISA that tells you all about how this plays. We will not touch EAS. EAS is necessary for AM, FM radio and 1.0 television. Our goal is not to replace it. Our goal is to more or less make it moot over time and have a system that's better out there so that there'll be a nice slow transition to the better system. The user's control is paramount. Up until now, every emergency alerting system you're aware of had the broadcaster in control. AEA&I emphasizes information and broadcast news. It's not just ringing the bell. It's getting rid of that milling by sending that information afterwards. And almost all relevant alerts from any trusted sources are transmitted. So there is no gatekeeper role in here. Alerts come from broadcasters that may be trivial. So school closing, sure, you can do that, built into the very same system. And the reason you want to do that is you want the system to be used constantly, not just in the very bad day scenario. You want it to become part of how broadcasting works and how people consume the content, and it does. So the broadcaster app does all the heavy lifting. There's very little at the television station and the path uphill that happens. The BA does all the filtering and knows where the device is and knows where the person is, even if they're moving in their cell phone. So that application is the really important part of it. And it does not interrupt the programming without the user's consent, which is ultra important because people have different levels of alerting they want to know. If you're a scanner freak, you want to see everything that's out there. And if you're using this in a much more controlled environment, you probably don't want to see a whole lot of alerting going on here. So to kind of be a little bit repetitive, but just to make sure we got all this, every alert silently goes to every device. The BA does all that heavy lifting, the users control, the stations do nothing except transmit the alerts. And of course, their news departments come in with the information afterwards. And the station's big responsibility is that information to aggregate, curate, validate, prepare, present, and distribute it. That's what television broadcasters and radio news broadcasters have been doing since the beginning of the media here. We're just making it formal and attaching it to a better platform. So let's walk real quickly through how this works in 5 steps. So step number 1, the alert is issued by a trusted source. It is either the national government, the National Weather Service, state and local authorities, some military and safety. There are cases where power plants and chemical plants are also trusted sources that could report that send an alarm that something's happening, the chemical spill, things like that. The delivery mean is primarily via iPause, but there are also ways to get other CAP messages. That's the Common Alerting Protocol messages into the system. It can also be EAS, just like the old PEP system, which is still out there, the primary entry point where the 50 kilowatters form a mesh network out there. Warn that's run on PBS is used for WIA at the moment, but that's a satellite delivered opportunity. And of course, you can always go to the local and unique contributors. So this is also a chart that you will run into if you Google anything along emergency alerting. It kind of lists all the trusted sources, but my favorite is always the local one-offs. It's how the local sheriff gets in touch with a broadcaster in Montana, which is completely different than how the mayor gets in touch with the broadcasters in New York City. And there have been all sorts of communications paths set up to meet local needs, which I think is one of the fun part about doing emergency alerting and informing, is that every community is different here. So let's talk about the mesh network pretty quick. EAS, as you know, was a mesh network. Every radio station listened to every other radio and television station, or at least enough of them to form a mesh network here. AEA&I is automatic. There is no operator or intelligence required here. It's been programmed. It is purely reactionary state. Broadcast is highly reliable. We only need one station to survive. Most stations are pretty hardened. Broadcast stations don't tend to fall down or burn up or run out of fuel quite the way everything else does. Everything else, orders of magnitude more fragile in terms of delivery of information. If it isn't the loss of a cell tower or the overloading of the system, it's something having to do with the interconnection between the nodes in here. They're highly vulnerable compared to what a broadcast system is. And AEA&I shares everything instantly between stations. So step 2 is the aggregation process. I won't read the whole slide here, but basically it takes in all this information and runs it through a meat grinder kind of device. I'm going to remind you of this drawing. That's that big blob in the middle there. And in real life, it probably looks like a SAGE alerting system, or in this case, this is a digital alert systems box. And you have seen this before. This is an EAS box. It goes all the way back to the beginning of EAS. Every station in the country and Canada and several other countries happen to have one of them. It's kind of the basics of all that. But in the end, this newer version is basically a specialized content server. So it has a lot more memory than the old original that was built in the age of the acoustic moment. And the only real restriction on it is it really does have to be hardware, or at least there has to be enough hardware in the station. It cannot live in the cloud, because you cannot stop emergency broadcasting just because you've lost connectivity to the internet, etc. Transmission is kind of fun. There is a thing inside ATSC3 called the bootstrap. We thank Mark Aiken for that, who fought the battle. It allows you to do two things. It is the lowest level of communication here. You can pick it up some 25 dB below the noise floor. It is the first thing any device finds. And it tells it two things. One, what is my state? Is there an emergency going on or not? And secondly, what am I broadcasting? What is the format that's coming here? What do the PLP, where do I look to find out where all the fine tuning, the physical layer pipes and all that are happening? The second part is that AEA-T table, which is 25 fields of who, what, where, when, etc. And then any kind of attached media, which can be anything from moving video to data, etc. So if you're into ATSC3, this is what the protocol stack looks like. And the part we're really interested in is right up here, is that all of those tables wind up in the next most robust layer, which is called the low-level signaling table. Mostly that's used for things like the service list, you know, what channels are here and what time it is and all of that. But AEA-T is an important part of that. And that takes us to the BA. So the BA is a really easy to understand thing. It is an app that runs just like it would on your computer or phone, but it runs on a TV. So here are some early prototypes, which they'll get better. In some cases, we cheated, made the lettering bigger so that we could read it easy as we worked on it. So here's one of them where you see that little remote control looking thing over there where it says 3 News up on the left. Yes, that is how you would navigate the BA, whether you're changing channels or whether where it's an emergency and you're scrolling through the information. The way it presents, as I said, is a squeeze and beep. This isn't exactly a squeeze and beep. There's some nuances into it. If you get into video, we have to maintain aspect ratios, etc. But the basic idea is that we do that little crawl down on the bottom here. That tells you what the message is. Like I said earlier, this is one I did as a demo just a couple of days ago, and I set up a couple of alerts. On here, Fred 1, Fred 2, and the navigation windows here are way bigger than they'll be in real life and more of them. But remember, this is a diagnostic tool. We're starting to get this running. So you see it squeeze back the video picture way more than it, no, like way more than it would in real life here. This is a composing tool. So behind this, when I set up that alert, I put in our test van because I just happened to see the picture there. Yes, it does have the obligatory 30-foot mast. No, we don't have a drone for it quite yet. And yes, because we're worried about mobile coverage, we tend not to use the mast a whole lot, but drive it around and do drive testing with it. So if I log in right now into the control architecture here, I get a couple of things. I get a new broadcast alert and a new property button. Those are the big ones. But I can also go over and pull down alert templates and properties and stuff over on the left there. What a new property is to us is a TV station. We have lots of properties, and they all have call letters and transmitters and things like this. So the next page is I can start to generate this message. Like I say, typically this would not be in a news department. It can be, for their kind of alerts. It would typically be a version of this that would be in one of those trusted sources like the National Weather Services, et cetera, like this. Had we pushed the other button and looked at the property, those are the list of television stations that we are running this on right now, on that BA. The one that's kind of important to us is the third one over in the middle of the top row is KSNV, which was the first three. It's the KDK of 3.0. What more can I say? And then we can also pull up test templates, we kind of showed you this before, but the navigation experience part, this is all the stuff, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but it's just the laundry list of what it does. But you could fill this out yourself. It does the filtering, it does the location, it handles playing back HTML and video and text and audio, all that stuff. So here's the squeeze and beep experience sitting on a real television we ran off of, I think off of Vegas. As I say, it never interrupts the programming. It never steps on EAS. If you're running an EAS simultaneously, yeah, it would be there as long as EAS survives. So you never lose a commercial or a play in a game. And there's no over alerting because it only does it on the televisions that are targeted. So not every, when EAS goes off, everybody that's tuned to channel 3 gets the EAS. When advanced emergency alerting and informing goes off, only those people in the affected area get the alert, and even then they can kind of set the level of intensity that they're interested in. And there are other devices that can pick it up. Home gateways, that's a whole topic unto itself. Smartphones, transportation, public signage, IoT, smoke alarms, anything you can put a 3.0 chip in. So we're at the end because we are at the termination and the cleanup step. And what happens here is that basic bootstrap sends a 00 and its wake up bits, and it says, I am now in a safe, non-emergency situation. It cleans up the cached files. Yes, we've been pushing all these pieces of information onto your phone and onto your television so you can grab them. You don't have to go out to the internet to get them. They're already there. So at the end of this, we clean that all up and everything returns to normal. And one other really cool thing is, in case somebody did push the wrong button, we have a whole process that says, never mind, it was a boo-boo, and de-escalates and unwind. And there's a huge amount of science, political science, emergency alerting science that goes into how you get people off the ledge after you just told them the world was going to come to an end, a la like they did in Hawaii not all that long ago. Producer tools are what's inside the station in order to produce this content to create an alert. And I'll talk just briefly about required versus voluntary. EAS and EBS were required systems historically. This is entirely a voluntary system, and that is actually kind of good. We like to, in our industry, broadcasting avoid regulation by doing it so well. Nobody sits there and says we'd like to apply rules to you, because they just get complicated and goofy. We are very dedicated to making this work very, very well. Oh, and one last thing for you RF geeks out here, my roof actually looks almost like this, really close, but you know, television has been moving away from over the air. They've been cable, satellite, you know, direct to home, and IP delivery for some time. ATSC3's primary purpose is to make it worthwhile to pick up that 3.0 signal and integrate it into what you're doing with the internet and everything else here. So in rural areas of America, it's back to antennas on roof. And that's it for me. Questions, comments, inquiries, complaints?
Thank you, Fred. That was outstanding. I like all the content that you just gave to us. I want to welcome Bill and Marty, our two moderators here. Marty is also a RCA Young Achiever from the past, and Carol Perry has this uncanny way. She's got the whole list of every Young Achiever for the last 30 years in her head, and she remembers Marty very well. So Marty and Bill will be looking for your questions in Q&A and chat. They are going to look there and ask the question. So Marty, why don't we start with you? A question for Fred.
For WJ asked, for off-the-air homes, will there be ATSC3 to analog or ATSC3 to 8 VSB converters available?
In a sense, I suspect there will be, but it's a little bit different. What you really want out of the lowest form of life here would be a dongle with an HDMI on one side and an F connector on the other. But what you really want to get to is a home gateway, and that's a whole different kind of presentation and topic, because this works so well with the internet. And that's how you get your return path. So if I have a home gateway that has my ISP coming into it and an antenna, you know, in the window, or maybe if you're in town, remember in urban areas with single frequency networks, the signal level is going to be really high. So it doesn't take much of an antenna to be able to pick this up. And it's OFDM, so it doesn't get garbaged up very easily either. So it's pretty easy to build a home gateway that integrates those functions together. And if you do that, then all of a sudden you've lit up an entire home. So pick something totally ridiculous, like I want to send a message to your refrigerator. I can do that. Take something more practical, the car parked in the garage. I want to send it updated maps. Either it's picking up 3.0 off the air, it's just moving around, or it's picking up the Wi-Fi in the home, and it's getting the updated maps for that also. But there's also a lot of business models in 3.0 that would like a gateway to have significant amount of storage for things like storing video and games and things that you know, you want to have as close to the edge as you can. We just move the edge with a gateway into the home, which is a pretty cool concept in and of itself. Did any of that make any sense?
Yeah, oh yeah, made a lot of sense.
Okay.
Let's go to Bill for another question. Bill?
So I don't have any other questions here that have been answered, but I'm looking forward to it. I did have a question of my own in terms of, you know, when you say that this is sort of eventually meant to make EAS moot, you know, how does EAS still work on the traditional cable networks as well as the satellite networks?
So I have to make a confession here. I wrote the original protocol for EAS a gajillion years ago, and at the time, it was, I mean, arguably, it was the first time digital data had been broadcast over the air. And what it is an offset modem running at 300 and, I don't remember I do remember that what you do is you take a burst crystal and you replace it with a 4 megahertz computer crystal, and somehow we thought that that would secure the data. That's how old EAS is. But EAS, AM radio was the center of the world at that point. It was really built for them. Nobody even cared if FM would carry it. Nobody had thought about what would happen with cable, and TV was like a complete afterthought. And all of a sudden, about the time it came out, there were character generators. So the expectations started to increase. So the fundamental problem with EAS, other than it's really old and was really smart, 20 years ago, is that it is in band. There was no way to send information without doing it in the same space that you viewed and listened to. So you had to put a big red square up on the screen that said EAS. You had to fire those crazy duck farts, which is the digital data that comes there. And the emergency community insisted that we had the two-tone alert from EBS because, well, people understood that. So it was just a sloppy mess from the get-go, but worth it because it saves life and property. 20 years later, looking back at that, and we go, cable has got Xfinity. They have smart set-top boxes in there. Why don't we just integrate with that world? The whole world is HTML, it's IP, trying to do something crazy, independent, and off on the side makes absolutely no sense at all. So EAS probably doesn't go away while I'm still alive, but it'll just kind of fade from popularity because look at this, something a whole lot better comes along. And keep in mind it's extensible because you and I can't see where this is going to go, but the system is so flexible. You can do that. EAS was totally non-extensible. I mean, you couldn't change the crystal in the darn thing without it falling apart. So that's what I know.
Fred, what is your time estimate of when 90% of the country will have 3.0?
Oh, a signal available?
Yes.
The official number Pearl is using and ATSC, I hear this all the time. I think Madeline said she was hoping within the year. Yeah.
All right.
The end of 21.
Boy,
that's one signal, and as it starts, it'll probably be. Well, I mean, all we're transmitting right now is some test stuff because there are 8 televisions out there in the world, and our regular video. So it's no improvement if you look at it right now. It's the same video we got on 1.0, although it is HDR, high dynamic range, and high gamut, and in some cases we're even doing a little 4K here and there.
All right, very good. Marty, a question for Fred.
Yeah, so we just got a chat one that I thought was kind of interesting, which somebody asked, does the fast automatic pass-through and high transmission of alerts mean there are higher risk points of vulnerability for cyber criminals and enemy states to hack and generate false alerts as compared to the past?
So, you're thinking zombie alerts, aren't you? It's kind of like this. The paths are really secure here. There's probably more security than one needs inside 3.0, in my humble opinion. But the vulnerability in EAS was that those DASDEC units and those SAGE units, sometimes the local approach part was that it was a telephone call in with a special code. So in each and every one of these cases to date that I'm aware of, and actually go to the Wikipedia and there's a list of all the hacking that's ever happened in EAS. It all boils down to they put the box in and didn't change the password. End of story. That's simple.
Very good. Thank you, Fred. Bill, another question for Fred.
Yeah, sure. Do you think it would be practical to actually maintain ATSC 1.0 transport with MPEG-4 and IP data, or did it really need to be thrown out? I mean, it looks like we're going to have a lot of set-top boxes that going to be thrown out as a result here.
Yeah, but they're cheap. So,
Yeah.
what else do you carry for that? Okay. I've been watching this conference on a tube television, an XL100 down in the barn. I converted the VGA and I transmitted, but that's like an extreme example. And I can still use that television set I got when we were first married 40 years ago with the little converter box on it that we got for $19.95. You're not going to throw a whole lot out here at the end of the day. The displays are reusable. The dongle, if people start making those in gateways, you're going to want to do this. You're not going to regret that. It's not like the old day. You're not throwing out that old glass tube thing. You're just throwing out the tuner portion of it, et cetera. And let's not even say throwing it out. You're upgrading it. Sooner or later, you got to get off DOS.
So Fred, what is the approximate manufactured cost increase to add 3.0 to a smartphone?
I have no actual idea. I do know that my boss, in order to facilitate this, has a standing offer for 1 million free chips to anybody who wants to put them in a phone or other device to seed the market. We're making a set of chips, but so does Sony and Sam, all the regular players do in here. It's more of a real estate issue and a power issue, and that's one of the reasons why that bootstrap sits there. The wake up bit is you don't want to burn up power constantly monitoring. Also, there's a way we work with WIA so that WIA can be the alarm bell, and that saves power there. So arguably it's cents to dollars.
Got it.
It's not big.
Marty, how about another question?
Sure. So I think there was an interesting question in the Q&A about how emergency managers will interact with generating alerts. So I think you spoke to that a little bit, and kind of with the evolution of technology, how emergency management departments and compared to EAS, how people will be able to pass along the message to be distributed.
One of the gifts of working with the land mobile radio and RCA over the years, I grew up as a broadcaster. All I ever wanted to do was play radio in northern Wisconsin. This whole career thing's gone crazy since then. The thing is this, is you learn that emergency managers, and this is part of putting EAS together, and broadcasters do not think alike at all. There's almost no common language even in it. So an emergency manager, so broadcasters thinking about the content and the audience all the time, okay, and they want eyeballs, and that's their motivation, and it's showbiz. Okay. Emergency managers are thinking about the crisis. They live for this. Okay. So an emergency manager, if he had his way, would interrupt every broadcast with every emergency they could possibly manage, no matter what, because that is what they do. Okay. The exact opposite of what a broadcaster does on the other side of it. But oddly enough, emergency managers don't like EAS because of the limitation it has on it. And because of the limitation that it has to be broadcast to everybody, they send an emergency alert out and the broadcaster goes, well, this is 100 people and it's a rainstorm at the north end of the county. And if you think I'm going to interrupt high school football for that, or a commercial, are you kidding? So the emergency managers are going, why aren't you passing our message? And the broadcasters are going, why don't you save this for the end of the world? We just solved that problem.
Bill, how about one last question for Fred?
Yeah, sure. So when it comes to ATS3 or ATSC 3.0, we had some questions about some people that live in, effectively Faraday cages of condos and houses that ATSC 1.0 doesn't really penetrate today. Will the new modulation actually work better and possibly get additional reach? Yeah.
So the Shannon curve moves by a little less than a dB. It's worth over 8 VSP. maybe I lied, maybe it's 1.2 dB, but it's not a lot, right? Okay, so, and the problem with television transmitters is they tend to be outside of town on tall towers, and the kilowatt at the corner is much better than the megawatt on the mountain, no matter how you cut it when you get into an urban setting. So yes, they have these wonderful Faraday cages, and you have to copper bomb them with RF in order to make that cell phone work inside there. So it's got to be fairly close. That's the single frequency network part of ATSC3. We built a system in Dallas as a test one using 3 dielectric antennas, and I believe we're at 100 kilowatts on each ERP on those, and we kind of moved to a model that you'll see out here. I can't say a whole lot about this, but I know this is going on. We're constructing a line of lower power, basically 100-watt kind of things that sit on telephone poles, and our objective is in urban areas is to just do the same kind of penetration as cell phone. And I'll tell you a backstory for that. When we did media flow at Qualcomm, the first thing you learn is that the expectation is if the cell phone works and I can make a telephone call, I expect the data is going to work, and if I have TV on it, I'm going to expect that the TV works. We're going to do the same thing. We got to get that level of RF carpet bombing and penetration there.
Fred, thanks very much, and thank you to our moderators, Marty and